What's going on, guys? This is Gene Jensen, and in this video you are going to learn how to find fish in the late summer and early fall transition. It is going to be a blast when those fish move up, so let me show you how to find them. It's killing me. There's fish all over the place, and I gotta make this video. Oh well, we'll make the video. All right, so to get you guys ready for the fall transition, I just want to talk about what the fish are going to be doing. I'm on Lake Guntersville right now. The fish are still pretty much in their summer pattern. They aren't quite starting to move. So see a little sign of them moving up shallow and moving up to these places, but not very much. So I just decided to sit down and make this video to get you guys ready. So the first thing you want to know is, when does this fall transition start? Basically when the water temperature starts to tank, starts to drop dramatically. The way I kind of see it is when I start wearing a hoodie in the morning, that's when the fall transition is going to be rolling. So kind of gauge, you know, a week, maybe a week and a half before you start wearing a hoodie. That's about when I'm going to start looking in these places. All right, so during the summer there were two different schools of fish, or two different locations you'd find the fish. You'd find the fish super shallow in the grass and in the shade and in the cover, and you'd find them deep on the offshore structure like humps and points, and in small lakes that'd be down in those deep holes and hanging on those deep stumps and stuff. So so they're going to start transitioning different. The shallow ones are going to stay shallow, and the big ones are going to start moving up shallow. Now, what caused them to move up shallow? Most lakes that thermocline out. Now, a thermocline is the spot in the water column, or the area in the water column that holds the most oxygen, usually around 68 to 70 degrees down deep. And that thermocline during the summer has started to get deeper and deeper and deeper as the upper water temperature warmed up. So as it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, it pushes those deeper fish that like to hang out on top of that thermocline down deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Okay, and so as the water starts to cool up, that thermocline starts to push up, starts to push those bass up. They don't want to be below it, because below it there's no oxygen. Above it there's oxygen, and then way up high there usually isn't very good dissolved oxygen unless you have grass. But anyway, so it pushes them up, and it spreads them out into or pushes them up into the cover that's shallower and shallower as the water temperature changes. So in these lakes like Guntersville, and these lakes that have a lot of current, like Chickamauga, anywhere along the Tennessee River, there's a lot of other lakes like that that are river system lakes, don't typically thermocline unless you get way back into a bigger creek that doesn't have a whole lot of current, or a bigger pocket that is protected and doesn't have a lot of current. But this lake does not thermocline, but the bass will tell you when they're transitioning. Those deeper bass that have been on the ledges and on the points will just push up to the grass edges, and that's about where we're at right now. Is these fish are just starting to push up to these grass edges along these shady banks and things like that, and these predictable areas that we're going to talk about in a second. So they start to push up, and they're pushing more and more shallower and more and more shallower. You'll first see them out in that deepest grass. You'll see them on that outside edge of the deepest grass. You'll see them cruising and stuff like that on your fish finder. You catch them deep cranking and deep spinnerbait. What else? I'll throw a Carolina rig and a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, so that's the first place I'll look for the deep fish. Now the shallow fish are just going to stay shallow. They're going to pull out to where the bait fish are. The bait fish are cruising up and down the outside grass line, and they're just going to pull out, and they're going to start to feed heavy on those bait fish that are cruising up and down the grass line. So as I'm working a grass line, as I'm working a bank line without grass, as I'm looking at maps and things like that, I'm looking for specific places that I call corrals. And if you think about what a corral is, it's something that traps your cattle or your livestock, and it traps them in there. So lead them in and you trap them in there, and then you close the gate. Well, that's basically what a bass is doing. A bass will cruise the grass line, but he likes these really cool places in the grass that are indentions that cause it has three sides. He'll corral the bait fish into those areas. Same thing with pockets on lakes. You go to the main lake, look for these pockets that are just little indentions, shallow pockets, have a little cover in them, and the bass will push the bait fish up into those pockets. Another place is a point. So you got a main lake point, and it comes, you got the bank that pulls out, and then you got the point that comes out just like this. Well, that turn is also a corral. It's got three sides. It's got the left side, the right side, and the back. And so they'll push the bait up into those turns on those points. So the inside, see, they're schooling right here on the edge of grass. It's driving me nuts. But anyway, so they'll push the bait up into that corral. What other places? Where two trees come in sometimes, but mainly they want it all the way to the bottom, something that they can push that bait into. So pay attention to pockets, points, and little pockets in grass. Now, where do you attack the fish in those pockets? The first place I hit are the one or the other corner. They're just as it turns into that pocket. So a point here and a point there, or a spot here and a spot there, and I'll work that, and I'll work it back into that point. On these little grass pockets that I'll be fishing later on today, hopefully catching something. I'm gonna hit the point, and then I'm gonna hit the back corner, or the very far back of it, and let the bait fall, and I'm gonna make 3 or 4 casts inside the pocket, and then hit the other point. And I'm going to do that every time I see one. In these pockets, like I said, I just cover I start with the outside point, and I work my way all the way back. And once you figure out about what position the fish are in, a lot of times they're in the center of that pocket. So don't forget to throw out away from the bank to see if they're out there in the center just a little bit deeper. A lot of times they'll be schooled up out there, and they'll push the bait into the back. But once the bait is in the back, they're going to be in the back too. So start fishing that back when you see bait ticking and stuff like that. All right, so lakes like Guntersville that have a lot of grass, or I just have grass in general. I used to fish a lake called Lake Varner before they put carp in it. They put grass park carp in it and killed off all the grass, but it was an amazing bite in September. I caught my 9.98 out of the grass in September, and it was doing exactly this. What happens is, as that water temperature starts to tank, the grass starts to die off. And as soon as it starts to die off, you may not be able to notice it, but as soon as it dies off, those fish are gone. They leave. And you'll be fishing it, and all of a sudden, be fishing it one day, and you'll come back a day or 2 or 3 later, and the bad bite's just not the same. And they're leaving because that grass is dying, and they're searching for the greenest grass. So the first thing I'm gonna do is, when I notice this, and I've got dead grass here and dead grass there, and all of a sudden I pitch in and I catch some really pretty green grass. Typically I'll catch a fish then too. But I've started to drag a heavy jig, something that'll pull up grass. And especially that deeper grass on these points and stuff like that. As the grass around it starts to die off, there'll be pockets of this live grass, and to find it, I'm dragging a heavy jig. And if you can find those small little pockets of just bright green grass in early fall, it is golden. I'm talking, out of that one patch of grass on Varner on that tournament, I caught a 9.98, a 6.7, and a 3.5 or something like that, and then left it. I had 3 spots on that entire end of that lake that had green grass, and we caught fish on every one of those spots. And I've seen it everywhere else. If you can find that green hydrilla or that green milfoil, just beautiful, beautiful bright grass, you will fill the boat, and you can throw just about anything at them. Now also, as this grass starts to die off and you start to see less and less of that green grass, the bass are going to push to hard cover, to rocks, to wood, to the bottom, to points. They're going to start pushing up into that hard cover, and they're going to, as they're working their way to these pockets. And so don't pass up, especially you don't pass up wood that's hanging in the water, laydowns and stuff like that, and don't pass up rocks, no matter how deep they are. Always take a couple, 2 or 3 casts at it. One thing I've figured out in the fall is I typically will get a bite in the first 10 casts in an area. or when I get on them, because they school up. And that's why a lot of the times, that's why it's so hard to find bass in the fall, is because they really group up tight. They get into these really small places. And I remember back when I deer hunted a lot in the late winter, when the rut was over and they were finished breeding and everything else, the deer would start to herd up, and it was feast or famine. You either were on them or you were in the desert. There was nothing. And that's just like what happens in the fall with the bass. The bass get into these real tight schools, and you can fill the boat or you cannot get a bite. It is crazy. But that's why I'm kind of telling you guys these areas to look, is because these are those high production areas where you're liable to find them. So hard cover in the rocks, on drops and stuff that are shallow. Man, they are schooling hard on this grass. It's driving me nuts. I'm gonna get up and hopefully catch one to end this video here in just a minute. But anyway, so hard cover, I covered that. All right, let me see what else I need to talk about. All right, so you get there early in the morning, and the bite is, it's so-so. It's all right. You're throwing a swim jig or a spinner bait or chatter bait or some type of a moving bait, square bill, and you're catching them every once in a while. And as that sun starts to come up, it casts shadows on the bank, along the bank. And just like me, I pulled into some shade this morning to do this video, so I'd be comfortable and not sweating and so on and so forth. Well, the bass love the shade too, and at night and early in the morning, they're scattered out. There's plenty of shade for them. There's no sun out. They're scattered out, and so as the sun comes up, it concentrates those fish further and further closer to the bank and pushes them into the shallow cover. And so I'm gonna fish that area, the shade, as long as I possibly can, until 11 o'clock, when the sun's almost straight up, and then noon you don't get any shade, and then kind of hang out, and I'll fish really, like I'll fish docks and stuff during the middle of the day, or grass, matted grass, and then once about 3 or 4 o'clock rolls around, I'll start hitting the shade on the other side. The afternoon night bite is typically not really super, but in that morning bite it really is. So concentrate on that shade with moving baits and with flipping baits, and we'll talk about baits here in just a second. So what's happening in this late summer, early fall, it's all about the bait fish. It's all about the shad or the minnows, and if you're in a small pond, it's the bluegill and the minnows. But it's all about the bait. The bass are going to be around the bait. I mean, if you can find a large concentration of bait, especially bait shallow, ticking the surface, or working like right now, working along this grass line. I know you guys can't see the grass line, and my camera's sitting solid right now, but the bass are going to be there, going to be in the area. So you need to work that area really good and really fast. This is the time of the year where you can work a little bit faster, and once you get bit, anchor down, start fishing. Like I said, they're going to be grouped up in these tight areas, and I must have pulled into a school of them to do this video, because I keep all on this grass line, there's fish blowing up. So get in those areas, fish efficiently and quickly until you get a bite, and then slow down. Let's talk about the lures that I'd be hanging out with. All right, lures, what I'm going to be throwing this time of the year. First one comes to mind is a spinnerbait. And I love a spinnerbait. Man, this thing has been destroyed by pike up north, but it's all bent up. I have to work on it a little bit. But this is a mini-me spinnerbait. It's just a compact little spinnerbait. It's got small blades. The bait fish right now are fairly small, and they're working right along the grass lines and in the trees and stuff like that, and in the grass. And spinnerbait comes through the grass pretty good. The next one's going to be a chatterbait. And this one's okay this time of the year, or in the late summer. It gets better as the fall goes on and on. But I always at least try it in and around the deeper grass and the deeper spots. That is I think that's a 3/8 ounce. Yeah, 3/8 ounce chatterbait. Probably ought to change to a 1/2 ounce. A swim jig. This is probably going to be my bread and butter, just search bait. Just a white or a green pumpkin swim jig or something like that. Just something that doesn't get hung up that much, that I can really fish fast. I've got a Rage Menace with one of the claws chopped off or cut off, and I'm still trying to figure out which is better, to have the claw on the top or the bottom. I think the bottom's better. I've gotten a lot fewer bites since I turned it up to the top. But so don't look at that. Flip it over. Do it on the other side. Let's see. swim jig. That's a greenfish tackle swim. I'll put a link down in the description to all the baits that I show you guys, just so you can go take a look at them, get a little closer look. Square bill is one. I don't have it out, especially if I'm fishing a lake that doesn't have a whole lot of grass but has a lot of bank cover and stuff like that, like laydowns. I'm going to be throwing a square bill. And then let's talk about your flipping baits, your baits that you want to throw to specific spots. One is the Texas rig. This just happens to be a rage craw, but any kind of a Texas rig will do. Texas rig worm, Texas rig creature bait I like to use, and it probably will change to something a little bit smaller that looks like a crawfish, but I just like to use crawfish patterns. As the water gets cooler and cooler, it just tends to work a little bit better. But this one's a peg Texas rig. I peg mine just out of confidence, out of knowing that the weight's not going to get ahead of the bait and get wrapped around things and get hung up in the grass and stuff like that, especially when I'm picking fish in heavier cover. But if you're just working the bank and you don't have a lot of really thick cover, you don't need to have it pegged. But yeah, that's a good old Texas rig. And this is one that kind of may surprise you, or at least it does me, that it works so well this time of the year. But just a really small jig, and I love this is the Strike King structure jig, but it's the baby structure jig, and I like it because it comes in 3/8 ounce, but it's still a really small, light wired hook, small profile jig. And trailers is what I found is key. I stay away from the rage type trailers that kick a lot. I go with a trailer that doesn't have a whole lot of action, and this is a baby chunk, or a super chunk from Zoom is usually the type of trailer that I use that doesn't have a whole lot of thump. And I just flip that around cover and stuff like that. I'll probably dip this in some chartreuse or some methylate, JJ's Magic. Methylate will turn it orange. Chartreuse, of course, will turn it yellow. Just the tips of it. But yeah, that is, I mean, you talking about something that'll catch the small fish, but big fish love jigs, and this is what will clean up and clean up the big ones and find the big ones along as you're fishing around the shallow cover. Oh, and one more thing, and just for fun, and actually when the bass get into the mats this time of the year, and as October comes around and that kind of stuff, as it gets a little further in the fall, on these grass lakes that mat up, you can't beat a frog. I mean, I've caught one on this already this morning out of a tree. I love fishing a frog, but it's not going to be my priority. It's not going to be one of those things that I'm going to specifically throw all day long unless the bass are in that grass. I really want to find those mega schools that are schooled up and just be able to load the boat. So I'm going to use the other things. But a frog is really good. This just happens to be the new 13 fishing, what do they call it? The something panda, the trash panda. And so far so good on this. It's got a great hookup ratio. I haven't missed a fish on it yet. As a matter of fact, this morning both hooks were coming out the top of that fish's mouth. It was pretty cool. I'll show you a little clip of that. But anyway, so a frog. And then another thing that I'll be throwing is a shaky head, and I don't have one out either, but just a little shaky head straight worm that you can pitch around cover if you don't have a whole lot of grass. If you're just fishing shallow banks and in the shallow cover, I'm going to have a shaky head, but I'm going to have it on 12 to 15 pound test, a little bit heavier stuff, and be fishing a full length straight worm. So when I say full length, 7.5, 8 inches, somewhere around there. But those are the baits, those are the locations, and that's how I find fish in the fall. So in the next few weeks, as your water temperatures start to fall, some of you guys up north, it already has, start looking in those shallow pockets. Start looking in those little cuts, in those corrals. Find a place that the bass are going to push the bait fish into, and I promise you, you're going to catch a lot. You really are. So, like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water, go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. We'll see you.